Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. And Tom, we got a lot to talk about, but before we get into all the Ohio State stuff, I figured we should probably touch base on the latest college sports scandal to rock the nation, in which the feds bust a bunch of rich people for trying to get their rich kids into expensive schools that they weren't smart enough or qualified enough to be in. And this isn't a day for Schadenfreude for me, because, one day I'll be rich and I won't be able to get people into places that I want them to get into. But it's to see, the famous names or whatever, that's great and all. I think the thing that shocked me most about this is that coaches are taking money to put players on their teams, and not really even to put players on their teams, but just to get them on the athletic department website, basically, and have a bio of them, and then we don't ever need to see you again, or you go get injured. Reading through some of this stuff, and if you're not sure what we're talking about, I guess I should explain that. Rich folks have been paying a fixer, a handler, to get their kids into schools like USC, Yale, whatever, on as athletes, so that their admission standards aren't as high as the normal students. And so this obviously being athletes is fake. And reading some of these reports where coaches are saying, one of the kids was going to be in water polo, and they're like, well, do you have any photos of him playing water polo? And parents are like, no, he doesn't play water polo. They're like, well, go take some photos of him in the pool. And I guess one of the photos, he was too far out of the pool. And they're like, no, that's not believable. He's too far out of the pool, which tells you he's probably in 4 feet of water, and he's jumping up thinking that's what water polo does. And they're like, no, you're way too far out of the water. So take another one where you're not as far out, and then that'll be perfect. There's another one where they're asking a girl's going to be doing crew or something. And they're like, do you have any photos of her in a boat? And they're like, no. And I think they're like, well, we'll try to find one here that's obscured of some other person. And really, it seems like all of these schools, Tom, should be in the SEC.
I think of all of the things that blew my mind about that story, besides Aunt Becky from Full House trying to pay $500,000 to get her kids into USC, or, photoshopping pole vaulters or whatever it was, the most mind-blowing thing about that whole story was Stanford has a sailing team. That was my big takeaway. Stanford has a sailing team as apparently a varsity sport, which one of the kids was going to get into Stanford because they were going to pretend he was a member of the varsity sailing team. I did not know that was a sport that you could do in college.
What struck me most is that there is a USC Los Angeles, as opposed to just a regular USC. I guess there's a branch, and I'm wondering, how would these elitists who want their kids to be at elite schools, why would they fork over money to go to the branch campus? I don't see anybody, and no offense to OSU Lima, I don't see anybody forking over $125,000 to be put on the basketball team, quote unquote, at OSU Lima. So that one struck me odd, that, you would think if this is about prestige, I can't let my son or my daughter go to USC LA. I would die. The other thing, you're talking about Aunt Becky, and I never watched TGIF. I thought, back in the day, ABC sitcoms are terrible, other than Roseanne, which was, that's not a Friday night thing. That was a Tuesday or Wednesday night thing. I watched a lot of TV as a kid. I was pretty popular. But as they're trying to figure out how to get these girls into USC, and I'm guessing this handler is like, well, she could be a coxswain. And I'm sure they're like, what did you just say?
First of all, it's pronounced coxswain, but go on.
No, but you could pronounce it two ways. I looked on the internet. But but then they're like, no, it's like for crew, and she's in the back of the boat, and then I'm sure they're like, what? No, my baby does not get put in the back of the boat. They are on the front of the boat, and then they're like, no, she steers and she tells people what to do, and that's when their ears perk up, like, oh, she gets to boss people around. I like this crew stuff. Yes, my daughter will do crew, and these $500,000 to get your kid into USC when it's such a shallow thing when it's for the parents because they can't have their child going to a state school because that is just embarrassing. But it has nothing to do with the level of education because obviously the William H. Macy's wife allegedly paid $40,000 to have an SAT fixer come in who administers these SATs and then also helps them out with them, changes some answers. And I was thinking, you know what? If I had a fixer in high school, then I could have gone out drinking like I did the night before ACTs anyways. But at this time, I would have been able to feel much, much more confident about what I was going to do.
I think that if I had to go back to high school and have $40,000 to spend on something, I probably would have spent it on something other than my SAT score. That's just
CDs. Nintendo.
Really, really good photoshops of me playing water polo so that I too could get into Yale.
I think, isn't this how The Sopranos got Meadow into Georgetown?
There was something like that. Yeah, didn't Carmela get like strong arm someone into writing?
It was Carmela.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah. So
and there was like some, we need a recommendation, and but this is just straight up crazy fraud, and the fixer made some pretty good money at it for a while, but now not so much. And I'll be interested to see what kind of hand slaps these people get when you've got like parents in poorer areas of the country and cities who, put that their kid is living with an uncle in high school so that they can go to a better school, and, they get in trouble for that, where, those people are trying to give their kids a better shot at life. And these people here are just trying to make their child look better and themselves better by proxy because, yes, my child is a Stanford man and he sails.
You can just buy the window sticker for your car. It costs like $4, and then everyone will think your kid goes to Stanford. No one's going to go check up on it. So that seems like a much cheaper solution. But that's just me thinking outside the box. The real question here is, how much do you think John O'Corn's parents paid to get him into Michigan?
See, I wasn't going to say anything about that. I wasn't going to go into the whole Michigan thing, but at least $400,000.
Ohio State got their money's worth on that one.
Look, we'll go halvesies. OSU pays $250, and Michigan pays $150. I think it worked out both, well for everybody. John O'Corn got his Michigan education, and Ohio State, you know what? They got what they always get, and I guess they are kind of like rich folks paying for stuff that they don't really, need, because they're going to get it anyway. Like, those kids don't need a USC education. They're fine. If your parents can afford to pay $500,000 for your fake, photoshops and things like that, you're going to be okay. And Ohio State, they didn't need to pay $250,000 to get John O'Corn into Michigan, but if you got it, and you're not going to get in trouble for it, why not?
I mean, Ohio State spent $2.3 million on Greg Schiano and Alex Grinch last year, so a couple $100,000 towards making John O'Corn happen. That's pretty good ROI, if you ask me.
Yeah, you're right. And sometimes those smaller investments are, they help, I guess, negate the big bad investments. And, so it's diversify, I guess is what they say, right, Tom?
That's the Wu-Tang Financial. You got to diversify your bonds, if I recall correctly from the Chappelle Show. It's been a while.
Yes. So that is the latest NCAA scandal, and we'll see what comes of it and see if anybody else gets implicated. Don't worry, there's nothing Big Ten, because it's easy to get into any Big Ten school, except for those poor kids who want to go to Michigan State and then have to fall back and end up going to Michigan. But, they make out as, they get their kinesiology degree and they go ahead and, I don't know what they do with that, but they talk to people about movement.
They go pro in something other than sports.
So speaking of, I guess that'll do it for that. Last week we were thinking about doing a podcast after the second practice, which was Friday. And then we decided if we did that, what would we talk about today? And that's why, there was just one last week, but that's, really all you need, unless we give you 2 a week. And then really that's all you need. What we got to see on Friday, the quarterbacks were better. I guess that we should have expected that. And Justin Fields said after the second practices, he was like, well, it's been, months, 2-3 months since anybody has had a practice. So yeah, we were going to be rusty. And Matthew Baldwin said that he does better when he's not thinking about things. And that was a practice he had, 3 months to think about. And they were rusty for a number of reasons, but they looked better on Friday. You asked me after practice, who did I think had the better day, and I didn't really know. And you felt like Baldwin had the better day, and then I'm going back to through the notes and just remembering on the one-on-ones where the first day with the one-on-ones between the receivers and the DBs, they let each quarterback throw about 8 or 9 or 10, and then it's the next guy. And so on Friday, Baldwin threw his 8 or 9. And then Fields came in and threw 2 deep passes, and then it was yanked, and Baldwin was put back in, and they were, then they would alternate. So I'm thinking like Mike Yursich, I probably saw what you saw there, Tom.
And I walked away with the feeling that Baldwin was a little bit more accurate in that second practice last week. And it wasn't real clear cut, and there were people who walked away thinking the opposite, which, it was pretty subjective. It was a pretty small sample, and they weren't doing a ton that was real definitive, I didn't think. But I was kind of generally more impressed with Baldwin's accuracy. The thing that was clear cut to me, and I don't know how much you watched the throws when they were working kind of on the far end of the field, when they were throwing like a 30-yard pass into the end zone, we had a really good angle on the ball in the air, and it was kind of going right across our field of vision. And Fields' throws were noticeably lower to the ground, like straight line kind of throws. Baldwin's had a little more arc on them. So, I mean, the only thing I think you could come away from that practice feeling real definitive about was Fields probably has a stronger arm than Baldwin does. The accuracy thing, I think, probably I would give a little bit of edge to Baldwin, but that's, we had this conversation last week. This is practice 2 now of 15 in the spring. So, we will
do that all the way through practice.
Exactly.
15.
We will just keep reminding you. This is the boxing referees scoring the first round of a 15-round fight or the second round of a 15-round fight, and 2 of the judges had it 10-9 Baldwin, and one of them had it 10-9 Fields. So that's yes, Baldwin maybe possibly won that round, but it's probably I don't think anyone's about to throw in the towel just yet. Put it that way.
No, and Baldwin was asked after practice. After practice, we got to talk to Yursich and all 4 quarterbacks. That's Fields, that's Baldwin, that's Chugs, and that's Danny Vanatsky, who what do we call him?
Does he have a middle name? If his middle name is like Michael or something, we would call him DMV. That wouldn't be bad. Isn't it the BMV in Ohio? The motor vehicles.
Yeah,
it doesn't work. That joke doesn't work in Ohio. So, yeah, I have nothing then.
No.
I guess we have to call him Danny.
I wonder what Danny. All right, and that's what he prefers, I believe. But Baldwin said, before Tate Martell transferred, he felt like he was chasing Tate Martell, and now that Martell is gone, he doesn't feel like he is chasing Justin Fields. He feels like it's an even battle, and he says, talking up Justin Fields, like it's great to watch him and compete against him because he looks very good. And I also found it interesting. How Tate Martell, once he transferred, one of his family members, I won't say which one, started tweeting up a storm about liars and the lying that they do. And I'm not going to say what, school is implied there. But it was interesting that Baldwin said that Ryan Day kept him apprised of the entire situation with Justin Fields and, where things stood and why they were doing it. And it just shocks me that he would keep Matthew Baldwin apprised and would keep Tate Martell completely in the dark, which tells me even he is jealous of Tate Martell, Ryan Day.
I mean, Ryan Day has a lot of things going for him at this point, but he does not have Tate Martell's hair. So I think that's reasonable. That's tough but fair to be a little bit jealous of Tatham.
Get this kid out of here. But we talked to both of the guys, Baldwin and Fields, and really their attitude was, you couldn't have asked for better. There's no controversy there. And I also found what Baldwin had to say about, because everybody, and when I say everybody, the generalized assumption is that Justin Fields is going to start. And so then the next question becomes, are you, Matthew Baldwin, are you okay with not starting? And, as I mentioned here before, he didn't play until his senior season. And, is he tired of being patient? No, he believes there is value in patience, but he would rather play. And he used the example of Dwayne Haskins and Mitch Trubisky as guys who sat and waited. And then after one season of starting, went on to become, top 2, top 5, top 10 NFL draft picks. And as I mentioned a few weeks ago, he seems like the kind of guy who has, as Ryan Day says, he likes him because he's cerebral. He knows, I am at a pretty good spot for an NFL future if I stay here and learn from Ryan Day, learn from Mike Yurcich, and just soak all this in. And even if I don't get to start until I'm a redshirt junior, that still gives me 2 years of starting at Ohio State. The interesting thing, that's all interesting. I always say that. He mentioned the sooner you start, the bigger legacy you build. And that's why he wants to start sooner rather than later. But that all being said, it only takes 1 year of starting at Ohio State to become an NFL draft pick. But he's okay with waiting. That's how I see it, because he wants to build this legacy, or, he wants to play right away so he can build a bigger legacy. Whereas Justin Fields wants to play so that he can get out of here sooner. And I'm just interested, Tom, is that Justin Fields can sort of be seen as a mercenary in that aspect, whereas Matthew Baldwin wants to be something great at Ohio State. And I wondered just the dichotomy of the two, where you've got one who wants to leave a legacy and the other who just wants to leave.
Put it this way, if Matthew Baldwin was the starter and Matthew Baldwin was going to be a top 5 draft pick in 2 years, I would not expect Matthew Baldwin to stick around past his, that would be his redshirt sophomore year, to continue building a legacy. So there are some other elements of, you want to start early to Baldwin's thinking, I would guess, which is, you want to start early because generally there's a pretty strong correlation between quarterbacks, the number of reps they have in college, and how well they do in the pros. A lot of times the kind of 1 year wonder guys don't always pan out, or don't pan out to the level that some of the longer term college starters, like multi-year college starters, do. So there's that element of wanting to play in college as well. So the thing that's just fascinating to me is, we have had in the last year a quarterback who very openly talked about wanting to transfer, if, wanting to go be the starting quarterback somewhere, in Joe Burrow. And was super open about it in a way that no one ever is. And then he transferred. And then you had Tate Martell, who was 100% sure he was going to be the starter quarterback at Ohio State in 2019, and sending tweeting about how Justin Fields shouldn't swing and miss twice, and basically doing everything but marking his territory all over the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. And then he's gone 2 weeks after that. And like 2 weeks after saying he was 100% sure he was going to be the starter, he's gone. So I think Baldwin very genuinely could be planning to stick around if he's not the starter this year. He has given every indication that he is planning to stick around even if he's not the starter this year. But I just, at this point, I don't know if you can completely plan your future as an Ohio State program around the fact that, oh yeah, he's definitely going to stick around no matter what. I think that how many of the 3 scholarship quarterbacks that are around right now, how many of them are still on the roster on September 1st is going to be one of the defining questions of this Ohio State season. Because if, let's just say, Fields wins the job and Baldwin transfers, all of a sudden you've got Justin Fields and Chris Chuganoff and Danny Vanatsky, and that's your quarterback room. And if Justin Fields gets hurt, then you're down. You're already in your break glass in case of emergency quarterback, and that could happen in the first half of the first game. So, Ryan Day has talked about wanting to bring in a 4th guy, and I think that based on that and based on the uncertainty coming out of the spring with some of those backup quarterbacks, you might really have to bring in another quarterback to just give yourself another option. He said he wants 4. 3 maybe he can live with, but if there's a chance it's 2, I don't think they can risk that.
No, that you can't just have that. But at least it would free up a spot, right? Now they'd have some scholarship room to work with. I get why you're saying Matthew Baldwin is lying.
I don't think I said those exact words.
Well, we can go back and transcribe and see exactly how bad you said he was lying. I choose to believe him when he says he's not lying and that Tom is a liar.
I also don't remember him saying those exact words.
You weren't there. You were with Danny Vanatsky. He specifically called you out for words that you would be saying 5 days from then.
Excuse me, I was with Chugs. I think anyone who has listened to this podcast knows exactly who I was talking to the entirety of the time that the quarterbacks were out there.
You're like, Justin Fields, please go away. I'm trying to talk to Chugs. I have an idea for a sports bar. I think he needs to hear it.
I wrote a little bit about him on Tuesday this week, but in case you didn't read it, first of all, shame on you. Second of all, one of the things he talked about was he is thinking about going to law school, taking the LSATs, ultimately wants to be a sports agent. He's in sports management grad school right now. That's his master's program at Ohio State. And it was like, okay, sports management, sports agent. What about a sports bar? Seems like a related field. You want to pass the bar, you want to go into sports, maybe just open the Chug sports bar. I think the business plan is pretty much an absolute lock to be.
It's right there. Take that chocolate, take that peanut butter, and just smash them together. Exactly.
I don't want to say you're throwing your life away by being a successful sports agent, but you have it. You're literally, everyone calls you Chugs. Mm-hmm. You really, this is the universe telling you what it wants you to do.
Exactly. You're exactly right. This is like from the heavens. This is what you are meant to be, and I'm not saying that we are also angelic and are telling him to do this, but I'm not saying that. And so all the best to him and his future endeavors, as long as it's not as an agent or anything other than a sports bar owner. That's really where he needs to be. And how better to use an Ohio State graduate education, Tom?
Our friends at Campus Partners have helpfully opened up a lot of real estate along High Street. So there's a lot of development opportunities there. All those wonderful old places with character, all gone. You can go build a wonderful, nice, sterile, generic sports bar anywhere you want on High Street.
Perfect.
Go get it.
Yeah, go get it. There was other things that happened at practice as well. We saw Amir Reap working with the cornerbacks, and he has been at safety for the last 2 years. Came into Ohio State as a corner, was seen as a guy who could play corner or safety, and then moved quickly to safety and was there in 17 and 18, and then showed up on day 2 at corner while Shaun Wade was at safety. And Tom, I'm thinking like you've got Damon Arnett, you've got Jeff Okudah. If and maybe we'll see. Like if Tyreek Johnson, if Seven Banks, if Cameron Brown were really impressing the coaches, would they bother moving Amir Reep, or is it maybe like only one of the three is showing out and they still would prefer some depth there? Do you think it says more about the corner situation, or does it say more that they're pretty happy with the safeties right now? You know, Jordan Fuller is out, Josh Proctor, Isaiah Pryor, assuming Shaun Wade stays there, and you know I've been told he'll be the nickel and maybe not the safety. But those three guys this spring, and Fuller being the fourth, is there no room for Reap there? So is it a cornerback situation? Do you think it's a safety situation? Why was Amir Reap at corner? And sure, we could ask the coaches the next time we see them, but Tom, I'm asking you.
We're here to speculate, not report.
Thank you.
Come on, that's not what this is about. It seems to me that it means probably two different things. One, they're pretty comfortable with safety at this point if they feel they can move him off of there. And two, they're probably a little concerned about corner, because if he was repping with the twos, and you know, they're going through individual drills and we're just looking at which pairs of guys are running through the drills at the same time. So this is not a formal depth chart that you should carve into stone and have ready for week 1 against Florida Atlantic. This is the order guys are running through drills in practice number 2 of the spring. But Amir Reap was running through with the twos ahead of Tyreek Johnson, ahead of Cameron Brown. That tells me that they may be a little concerned that those two guys, Brown and Johnson, aren't ready to contribute at the level they need someone to contribute at to be that third or fourth cornerback this year. That's a little concerning, because that's a spot where Jeff Okudah at the end of his true freshman year was in there starting, or basically starting, the Cotton Bowl and playing a reasonably good game against USC. That's a spot where you can get on the field, and those are guys who came in with enough recruiting hype that they should be ready to contribute at some point this season. So if, they don't have to be ready practice 2 of spring, but they've got to be ready at some point during the season. I think that the fact that Reap is there maybe suggests that there's a little bit of concern from the coaching staff that they may not be, one or both of them may not be to the point where they're going to need to be this year. But again, this is practice 2 of the spring, and these are 2 new defensive backs coaches. Matt Barnes and Jeff Hafley were both there. They were kind of taking turns switching off. Barnes would do a few periods with the safeties, and Hafley would do a few periods with the corners, and then they would switch. So I think they're probably also just trying to get to know their personnel a little bit right now. But if you were looking to read something into that, possibly too early to actually have an informed opinion, that's what I think you could potentially read into that.
And with Tyreek Johnson and Seven Banks and Cameron Brown, they are all second-year players. And I'll remind everybody of Garyon Conley as a second-year player in 2014 when he was put into action against Michigan State up in East Lansing, got the start for an injured Eli Apple, and after Michigan State's first or second series was abused so badly that they had to put Eli Apple back in, insert him into the game even though he was banged up in order to help the defense out. So, and you can even go back to Marshawn Lattimore, who was a nickelback, part-time nickelback as a redshirt freshman and looked lost plenty of times in that year, and in 2015, I guess it would have been. So these corners, not necessarily in, as you said, practice 2, like bursting out of the seams in practice 2 of their second year of their first spring for Cameron Brown, second spring for Tyreek Johnson and Seven Banks. We're not writing them off by any means, but the fact that they've moved Amir Reep to corner is interesting nonetheless, and something to take note of when you're looking at the entire secondary. And I feel like Shaun Wade is the easiest fix there. But Hafley, it would seem, as he's not as enamored with the 3-man rotation at corner. So if he's going to be anywhere, he can get the most play at safety or nickel if he's not going to rotate in terms of Wade. And as nickel is going to play, 50-60% of the time anyway. Safety would obviously play much more than that. We'll see where he ends up. But after this season, where we expect, Arnett will go because he's a 5th-year senior, he'll be done. We expect Jeff Okudah then to leave. And now you are faced with 2 of those 3 second-year players are going to have to blossom as 3rd-year players. Is Amir Reep still at corner? Is he one of the top 2 or 3? You won't have anybody from the 2019 class. And they're going to assign some really good 2020 corners, but I would not expect any of them to get into the rotation, if there is even any type of rotation. So they have to be all in on these 3, and maybe that's Tom. Maybe that's the reason why you keep Shaun Wade at safety, so that those 3 can get as many reps as possible, just to be ready for 2020. And not that Urban Meyer would always get angry at people saying, are you worried? Are you doing anything now to prepare your players for 2020? And he's like, no, every game is too hard to win. You focus on that. But I think if you're looking for a positive in terms of keeping Shaun Wade away from corner, is that it forces those other guys to grow up quicker.
That would certainly be a benefit to it. I don't know that I think that he's definitely going to. I don't know if they know for sure where he's going to play this year. We have seen him with the corners. We have seen him kind of nickel. We have seen him with safeties, and we are literally 2 practices into the spring. So,
is that right?
As first reported on the Buckeye Weekly podcast, must credit, they may have an idea what they want to do with him, but they're sure giving him a chance in a couple different spots. And that may be a function of they think he fits in best as a nickel, for example, but they're still not sure exactly how comfortable they are with safety, that he might be the best safety. And if he's the best safety, then maybe they can get away with having Marcus Williamson be the nickel, for example. And maybe he's going to end up being one of the top 2 corners, and then they'll have to figure out something else. So they're clearly just kind of mixing and matching right now, I think. And we'll see. I'm going to be interested to see where he is. We get to watch, I think, 1 or 2 more practices in addition to the Student Appreciation Day later this spring. I'm going to be real interested to see where guys are at that point when they've had another week or 2 of practice to get a better sense for the personnel they have, figure out where they're going to fit different people, maybe figure out what the scheme is going to look like a little more. Because I don't get the sense that they know for sure what the scheme is going to look like either, let alone who's going to play where. So I think we're going to have a lot better idea on what they think they want to do with him 2 weeks from now than we do today. But the fact that they're moving him around is pretty interesting at this point, I think.
Yeah, and as long as he's getting a bunch of reps at nickel, he could very easily then transition to corner next year without much, You'll have 15 spring practices and however many in the fall to get him ready to. And he's a natural corner anyway, so I'm sure it would be like riding a bike for him. You mentioned guys moving around. Real quick, let's just mention Robert Landers was on crutches. Didn't seem super serious on Friday. I guess he Snapchatted from some hospital or medical place the night before, so some people were aware that he had something, and then we were speculating, it could have been anything, could have been a sickness, and then you see him walking out to midfield of the practice facility. I don't even know if he had a boot on or anything, but he was definitely on crutches. But yeah, it didn't seem serious. We'll see if he's back after, teams on spring break right now. We'll see if he's back when they return next week. But in terms of the defense and people moving around, Brendan White, I've seen him at linebacker. We've also seen him at safety, which has been confusing. But there were also times, and I'll continue to compare this to what I've seen from Michigan's defense. There were times in the past where Jabril Peppers would move back to safety and move up from there, and you're seeing just some glimpses of what they're going to do with him in terms of at least lining him up. We're not really seeing any type of scheming or anything, but it sure sounds like, from the way that Jeff Hafley has talked about, if you're good enough to play, they have to find a place for you. And having a guy like Brendan White who can move up and move back. We mentioned last week that there's going to be a lot of different smaller packages for guys. I think a lot of that is going to hinge on Brendan White. It'll hinge on Baron Browning as well. What do they get out of him? And Ryan Day said last week after practice, or during maybe the first practice, how he was hoping that things would click for Baron Browning this spring, which tells me that things haven't clicked. And now, stop me if you've heard this one, Tom, but maybe Tuff Borland was the best middle linebacker on the team last year. And when a coach says, he hopes it clicks with the guy, that tells me, like, there's a reason he wasn't playing as much as, people maybe thought he should have, but he still played quite a bit. And if he can just get better than that, now you've got some moving parts on this defense, and it makes it more difficult to prepare for. But the more talent you've got, the more options you've got. But Tom, they have to keep it simple.
Keeping it simple would not be bad. That would not be a bad thing. And that is based on the fact that we saw what Not Simple looked like in the last year, and Not Simple looked not great. So maybe try some Simple this year.
Looked simple to Maryland.
Not the good kind of simple, the bad kind of simple. The idea of hoping that something clicks with Browning is maybe the most insight we've gotten into where he is in his development right now. I mean, that sure sounds like he's not where he needs to be yet. And he's got another spring, and he has a linebackers coach this year. That's going to be exciting. But he is someone who, for all the world, it seems like it should happen. And he should be able to be an impact player for this team. And Ohio State went through this a few years ago with Curtis Grant, where it was like he came in with just all the hype in the world, and it took years and years and years, and it was like, is this the year for Curtis Grant? Is this the year for Curtis Grant? Is this the year for Curtis Grant? And you would get these sort of flashes from him, but it never quite translated into exactly what you thought you were getting just based on the recruiting rankings out of high school. And sometimes that happens with guys. And then you also have guys who come in and it takes a little while, and all of a sudden they click and they go from a couple of years of not much to superstars. That can happen too. This is a big spring for him because you've got a whole bunch of new coaches looking at you. You have everyone's kind of coming in with a kind of fresh set of eyes. This is an opportunity. If it had not clicked for you before, and the coaches were maybe holding the fact that it had not clicked before for you against you previously, all those guys are gone. So now you've got a chance to make a fresh impression this spring. He has the physical tools. He certainly seems like a smart kid. Urban Meyer always talked up him as a leader. I mean, it seems like all the pieces are there. And if it does fall into place, it could be pretty spectacular. But sometimes it happens and sometimes it doesn't. And this is going to be a big spring to figure out if it really is going to happen for him or not.
Etienne Sabino was another one where, he's a 5-star guy. Didn't do much his first 3 years. Then they redshirted him his 4th year just to, separate him from, I forget who at the time, but just to give him some more time to develop. And, it's just, like you said, it's a pretty big peek behind the curtain about hoping something clicks for anybody. And when a coach says that, that gives you a good sense of, there's been some rough spots, and maybe that's why they've kept him at middle linebacker so that he can continue to master a position, I guess, and rather than keep on moving him around to try to find a place for him. There is an interesting question that we got from former Buckeye quarterback Shane Falco, and he asks, is it fair to expect Al Washington to have a similar impact as Brian Hartline in his first year? And I'm thinking about it, and Brian Hartline walked into a veteran wide receiver room, 3 fifth-year seniors, and he had known all of these guys, which I think also helps and makes this a little bit of a different situation, but all kinds of veterans and young guys, even like Austin Mack and Benjamin Victor had played for 2 years, their first 2 years, and they were juniors. But this is also a pretty veteran group of linebackers where you've got Pete Werner, started as a sophomore last year. He's a junior now. Malik Harrison, leading tackler, is a senior. Tuff Borland is now a one-time captain entering his 4th season. Justin Hilliard, 5th-year senior. Baron Browning, unbelievably a junior. And then you've got the young guys like, Dallas Gant, the rest of the freshman class, Kayvon Pope and Taraja Mitchell. But this is a group of veterans who they should be able to learn quicker. They should be able to employ everything that they're being taught. I think it's a fair, marker, but to expect what Brian Hartline was able to do with the receivers is also a product of having Ryan Day throw the ball 40 times a game. Let's not forget that. But if you can get an all Big Ten or 2 linebacker out of this group, then I think Al Washington will have lived up to kind of what Brian Hartline did. I don't think it's out of line to expect it. Just, be aware that a lot of that production came from the passing offense, and just it would have come regardless of who the receivers coach was, but let's not, but I don't want to downplay what Brian Hartline did. Receivers were going to have a good year, but they were obviously better, but they were a veteran group, so they should have been better. Every year they get better. The linebackers, I think it's okay to expect a similar result, but also, Tom, it's one of those things where they have a lot of room to grow. So there should be a lot of growth seen.
There is a lot of room to grow. It is going to be a little bit like the Hartline situation from last year, in that so many things have changed this year that it's going to be almost impossible to tell exactly which parts were truly a Washington was responsible for and which parts were the changes in scheme freed up the linebackers, or the guys just are a year older and are better, or something else entirely. I think the question, I can give you a much more certain answer to, is it fair to expect Al Washington to get as much credit as Brian Hartline got last year? And no, he's probably not going to get as much credit. But Hartline came in, first of all, like you said, he had been there before. This was not him coming in cold off the street in January and not knowing anyone and not knowing the personnel. He had been here for a couple of years and knew the guys, had been working with them. So, that eliminated some of the learning curve on his side. Washington's kind of starting from scratch this spring. So that's a little bit of one thing to keep in mind. But last year with Hartline, it was a different quarterback. It was, you can debate exactly how much the difference between JT Barrett and Dwayne Haskins made in terms of how good the receivers looked last year, but there was an impact there. This year, that is the change in scheme. The linebackers were put in some positions last year which were probably not fair to the linebackers. So that alone is going to make the linebackers look better this year, probably. And that is not something that Washington has any direct impact on, just like Hartline didn't have any direct impact on the Barrett to Haskins upgrade last year. So I think it's reasonable to expect an improvement. I think it's reasonable to credit Washington for at least a chunk of that improvement when it happens. But the leap that the wide receivers took last year, if Ohio State has a linebacker who's looking like a first-round pick and a linebacker who's looking like, second or third-round pick next year in the NFL draft, then yes, you can go ahead and give Al Washington all the credit in the world that you want to. But I think that that's probably a little bit of a... I think if that happens, Ohio State has had one heck of a 2019 season. I think that is probably about a 90th percentile outcome for this linebacker unit this year.
By the way, some breaking news for the listeners out there. I'm sure this is the first you've heard of it. Before we went on, Odell Beckham Jr. had been traded to the Browns. Now it's coming out who is being sent to the Giants, and one of those players being sent to the Giants from the Browns is Jabril Peppers. So the Browns have rid themselves of Jabril Peppers, and they could have had Malik Hooker. They said, nah, we don't need that guy. We want Jabril Peppers. And now they have given him away along with a first rounder and a third rounder for Odell Beckham. So there's your breaking news. You come here for all of the news, not just, Ohio State news. There's also a little bit of Michigan news. Sometimes we talk about Michigan here. And so there you go. Tom, what are you going to do about, with your Browns Peppers jersey now?
I think Shannon may have accidentally burned that sometime last year. So he was just kind of grabbing stuff and burning stuff. So I'm sure he got a lot of extra stuff in addition to his own during that.
So we've spent some time on the defense. Let's go back real quick to the offense, and something that Ryan Day said last week, that the Buckeye offense is going to look at some under center stuff this spring. We talked to Mike Yursich after practice on Friday, and he went into some more depth about that. And one of the things he talked about, what he likes about it, is it allows the running backs to come downhill, see things better, and just get the ball when they're already on the move, but also then running the play action stuff off of that, and just dropping back out of that, how it freezes the defense an extra second or two to allow the receivers to get further downfield, which sounds exactly like what you would expect a former Big 12 offensive coordinator to say. It allows receivers to get downfield rather than, it allows them to run their 9-yard ins and also block. So I don't know. We'll see how much they do run it, but this also time will allow them to quarterback sneak it, as people have been clamoring for, based on their struggles last year. So when you factor in everything else that, with J.K. Dobbins saying, why he was having trouble last year, now they're going to run some under center stuff. Ryan Day talks about wanting to stay on the cutting edge, and the fact that he's even willing to look at stuff like this tells you that he's not as stubborn as Urban Meyer, for one, but he also isn't just going to, give lip service. Yeah, we want to be on the cutting edge of everything. That's why we only do what we do. But instead, no, they're looking at offenses all over the country to see stuff that would be good for them, good for their skill set. So it'll be interesting to see the offense back under center a bit this year. I think it'll be good for him.
In short yardage situations, especially, like get under center, give yourself some options. Oklahoma State, actually, Yursich came from Oklahoma State, and Oklahoma State actually did get under center a little bit last year. They had not done that for a while, for several years before that, but they did in their win over Texas last year. They ran some I formation last year against Texas, which in the Big 12 is like, that's basically like the wing T going. To run I formation in a league like that, but that's something that Yursich saw work a little bit in limited situations last year at Oklahoma State. So it makes sense to give it a try. And like you said, there is an element of this which is Urban Meyer is not here anymore to be stubborn and no, we're not doing it this way. Ryan Day's open to a few more things than Urban Meyer probably was. Because that was something that got brought up during press conferences last year when they couldn't run the ball on 4th and 1, and it was like, well, your quarterback is the size of a small pickup truck. Why don't you just put him under center and have him fall forward? And his exact response is, we'll take that under advisement or something like that. And they clearly did not take it under advisement because they did not do anything with it last year. So I would not expect to see them under formation 20 snaps a game or anything like that. But situationally, short yardage situation, give people a different look. Absolutely. Go ahead and use it. And if it's Justin Fields this year and you want to load up in a big like a jumbo formation and hand it off to J.K. Dobbins or have Justin Fields keep it and run a little bootleg off the off right tackle, like, yeah, sure, that seems like you've got a couple good options there. And wouldn't it be hilarious to watch Ohio State beat Michigan with like a waggle? That would be just. I mean, you mentioned Schadenfreude earlier in the podcast. If you were looking for a new and exciting way to beat Michigan, that would be one. Do it with just the classic Michigan waggle. Hit the tight end for a touchdown. But I mean, that would involve the tight end, throwing to the tight end. So yeah. I mean,
let's stay in reality.
This is all very, very groundbreaking, revolutionary stuff.
Yes, Brown Thunder is more realistic than what you just said. It also, the whole going under center thing just gives the defense more things to prepare for during the week, which, anytime you can get them thinking about stuff other than what you're actually going to be doing is, that's time well spent for the offense and time poorly spent for the defense, which is exactly what you want. The Buckeyes had a commitment this week from 6'8", 320-pound offensive lineman Trey LaRue out of Norwalk, Ohio. And he is a 3-star guy, I think the number 38 offensive tackle in the nation, and somewhere in the 800 or 900s overall. And Tom, it was pretty clear to me that Ryan Day has listened to our show probably several times, maybe religiously, especially when we talked about just signing the 3 best offensive linemen in Ohio every year, regardless of their rankings, and you'll be pretty okay with that. And now you've got Trey LaRue or LaRaux. I'm not sure. Let's go with LaRue. But you've got him and you've got Jacob James, the 3-star, who is rated a little bit better. Had some better offers as well, like LSU and maybe like Penn State or Michigan maybe in there. But LaRue had, like Kentucky, Purdue, those types of offers. Indiana, Ohio State was his biggest offer. So it's interesting to see Ryan Day, again, following through with what he said, even when he was hired, is yes, we are going to be more aggressive in Ohio. And as I wrote this maybe Monday or so, is that Ryan Day is going to obviously pull the trigger on some of these guys where I don't think LaRue gets an offer until he camps and impresses. And I don't think maybe the same it could be said for Jacob James, although I'm not exactly sure when he got his offer, but Ryan Day is not going to wait like Urban Meyer did, and not going to be caught in a situation that he was caught in, that the Buckeyes ended up getting caught in last year, where they miss out on a bunch of Ohio linemen. Every year, Ohio linemen leave the state, and your head coach, everybody out there, your head coach, Ryan Day, listening to this podcast, listening to us, only good things can come from that, Tom.
There was a comment on the article about this when we posted it to Facebook, and someone commented how, here we go, 1980s recruiting is coming back. And it's like, all right, that's first of all, they are they know that when they throw these offers out, there's a pretty good chance the kid is going to commit then right on the spot or very shortly after that. Jacob James committed on the spot. LaRue committed, I think he waited 3 days between the offer and the commitment. Maybe it was 2 days. It was not long, less than a week. They have to feel pretty good about these guys because they know if they throw out an offer, there's a pretty good chance that kid's going to commit almost immediately. This is not something you're going to slow play. If you're going to put out an offer, you're going to have a pretty good sense that you're comfortable with where that kid stands. And that can be a little bit dangerous with Ohio players because you don't want to tick off Ohio high school coaches. You don't want to have to back out on guys later in the cycle if you're not happy with the development, all that kind of stuff. So you have to be pretty judicious with who you do this with. But the fact that they're doing it tells you they're probably they all of the things I have just said, they are aware of all of them, and that means they're comfortable with these guys. They're happy with what they think they're getting. They're happy with the development they think they can get out of these guys. Offensive line is a very projection-based position. You do not get a lot of finished products coming out of high school. That is a position where you've got to take it's going to take a couple years in a lot of cases for these guys to be in a position to even contribute on the two deep, let alone be starters. So if you were griping about the fact that they missed out on all of these in-state kids and got themselves in a real mess with their depth chart 3 months ago, this is how you fix that issue. You are not going to get 5 4-star offensive linemen every year from across the country. And when you do, sometimes they don't pan out or they get homesick and they leave, and then you're left kind of in the lurch. If you take like we said, these 3 guys, pick 3 in-state kids and then take a flyer on 1 or 2 guys from out of state every year, that you're going to end up with a pretty good line and pretty good depth, because these are kids who may take a while to develop, but as long as some of them pan out, you don't need all of them to pan out, but as long as some of them pan out, you're in pretty good shape.
And there is, maybe there's the danger. It could be the 2011 class with Chris Carter and Antonio Underwood and Tommy Brown. But I think that's a better alternative to have bodies than not, and to need some, even if it's just the 9th, the 10th, the 11th guy, because Antonio Underwood was the third guard in 2013, 2014 or so. So even when you get guys who never start or move, they can at least come in and be better than the 9th guy or the 10th guy, and it's science. We told you, we explained it to everybody. Just do this, and you'll be okay. And, congratulations to Ryan Day for listening to us. It's good to have an Ohio State coach back in the saddle who listens to us. Finally, I can't say again because it's the first time ever. But as we always say here, all hail Ryan Day, right? I mean, given stuff to the media, giving us our room back at the WAC, allowing us to watch 2 full practices this spring, even though we have to be with the dirty students while we do one of those. But still, everything so far. And again, he has the highest winning percentage in Ohio State history, which I guess is important to some people. I'm more concerned about us getting into practice. And so far, no massive complaints, because while we're only getting to see some, if we got to see too much, it's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work. The practice notes go a little longer. The podcasts go a little longer. This is a responsible amount of work.
Right.
That's all. He has yet to do anything noticeably bad. All of his recruits have panned out. He has not lost a game yet. He has not. He showed up a little early for one press conference.
That is true.
But that's okay. As long as it's consistent, that's fine. And as long as he never loses a game and never has a recruit fail to pan out and never does anything to anger the media, I think he's got a bright future at Ohio State.
I'm waiting for my first, well, that's a stupid question. Not to me, because I mean that would never happen.
Not obviously, no. Obviously not. No, this is maybe our version of the old Urban Meyer line. All he has to do is give us access to exactly the amount of practice we want to, answer all the questions that we want in exactly the way we want him to, and feed us every week.
Yeah,
go get him, Tiger.
Yeah, go get him, Tiger. So you got results back. You FOIA'd the coaching salaries, and you got that back this week. I guess I shouldn't be surprised. There's only $1 million coach at the moment, and that was Greg Madison. But with incentives, like 3 other guys probably should get there this year. Is that how that turned out?
There could be as many as 5 guys who get there, depending on what they do. Greg Madison is the only guy who was over $1 million, but with bonuses. They have bonuses for winning the Big Ten. They have bonuses for getting into the college football playoff. They have bonuses for winning a first college football playoff game. They have bonuses for a 9+ win season and a bowl game. All of those things could bump them. If they win the Big Ten, I think 5 guys could make over $1 million, because there's a whole bunch of guys clustered around 900,000, 950,000. Yeah. So you're gonna. It seemed almost intentional that they were all clustered just shy of that number, so that they, you don't get the big splashy headline that Ohio State has 5 coaches making $1 million. That seemed pretty intentional. So yeah, it's they got the headline they wanted. Ohio State is down to $1 million assistant coach for now, but yeah, the good news is, if Ohio State has a kind of season that ends up with 5 assistant coaches making $1 million, at that point, no one's going to care, because everyone's going to be going, "Wee, college football playoff," or whatever they have done at that point. Yeah. What was interesting to me was, I thought for sure they would have a bonus for beating Michigan, or something like that. There were no individual game bonuses. There were just kind of like broad season goal kind of bonuses. It seems like there should be a bonus in there for beating Michigan, doesn't it?
Yes, but then is that giving, you get the bonus for making it to the Big Ten championship game, or for winning a Big Ten championship. Now, there was like 2 bonuses there. One was like 8.5%, the other was like 4.25%. But was the first one the regular season, and then the second one was the championship game? There's no regular season, but.
Well, it just said win the Big Ten, or Big Ten champions, or Big Ten co-champions. And then there was another line that said win the Big Ten championship game. So I wasn't sure if win the Big Ten or be Big Ten co-champions is just kind of like a boilerplate thing they have in every contract. Like the field hockey team has the same thing, where that's just boilerplate language they have in everyone's thing, or if they meant the division. That was kind of unclear, because it did seem redundant.
So you're talking, you win the Big Ten championship game. That's like a 12.75% bonus of that 900,000 or whatever, and that's going to put you right at that $1 million. I think you're right about that, where you keep everybody under, not everybody, you keep most everybody under that 1 million, because after the season, like, people don't really, there isn't always, it's the USA Today list that comes out, whereas, so people don't necessarily FOIA stuff after the season. It's before the season, when the coaching staff is hired and new guys are brought in, and where, all of the outlets go and get that information, and don't necessarily do it in January, like after all of the things have been done, because we could just figure it out on our own at that point and put that information out there. The Urban Meyer is now going to work at Fox for their Saturday morning college preview show from 11 to noon. And it's their bid to compete with ESPN Game Day, which is a losing proposition, but it's an alternative to those Buckeye fans who have not watched ESPN in 20 years. But it's also an alternative to people who want to watch a preview show that isn't just talking about the SEC. So we're in the press box generally for a lot of these, and so we don't really get to watch them. I mean, Urban Meyer is getting torn down by some people for this, but I mean, he's going to get torn down by the pundits, the people who write these sort of things, regardless of what he does. I don't know, Tom. Do we really care? I mean, it is what it is at this point, and go do your show. And I don't know that it's all that newsworthy, other than now you have an alternative on network television to ESPN Game Day.
I don't think that this is something that is going to make a material difference in just about anybody's life. If you want to watch one pregame show, that's fine. If you want to watch another pregame show, that's fine. I have spent probably the last 8 or 9 years not watching because either have been working, or when I wasn't working at these games, that was always my time to go do stuff with my kids. And then my wife was a football widow at noon when the game started. So I don't think it's going to materially impact too many people's lives or completely swing the ratings one way or the other. It was interesting, though, the feedback, like the reaction to it, like there was some like legitimate backlash, like how dare they? Pointer, which is a journalism kind of watchdog group, was like angry about it. Like, why would they do this? He had this, with the Zach Smith stuff and all of that, and how he is very unlikable and that this was a terrible mistake. And it was like, really? Like there are lots of coaches on TV that are, at least as objectionable as Urban Meyer, if not more so. And I don't ever remember reaction to that. I mean, they're not putting Art Briles on their TV show. Like it just, and if Brian Kelly was the coach who was put on the show, would that get that kind of reaction? Because Brian Kelly's had some unpleasantness off the field at Notre Dame. And, Nick Saban has had some unpleasantness off the field at Alabama.
Lou Holtz has put every school he's ever been at on probation. Right.
And I think Urban Meyer gets held to a little bit of a different standard, which the end of his Florida tenure wasn't great, but the end of his Florida tenure was literally almost a decade ago at this point. So he has a new track record, which has generally been pretty positive. So I thought the backlash to it was maybe the most surprising. Like overall, it seemed like that's fine, whatever, who cares? It doesn't really make a big difference. And there were people that could not wait to jump on it. And that, maybe that's just his name gets clicks and his name draws attention and eyeballs. And so therefore writing about how it's a scandal or terrible draws those eyeballs. I don't know. It just, the response to it seemed disproportionate to the news.
Yeah, and Reggie Bush is also part of that show. And it's, you think about his time in college where he actually lost his Heisman Trophy, and that's not even, that's not controversial at all. But of course, Urban Meyer is. And why he gets that reaction, I do think some of it is his attitude, and people say he's arrogant or whatever. I think he holds himself to a standard, and so other people will maybe do that as well. And then anytime he falls short of that standard, then it's a field day. And Dan Wolkin from USA Today wrote a scathing piece, and it was clear like he just does not like Urban. And he's one of those guys that if he's your coach, you love him. If he's not, you hate him. And there's Buckeye fans know that because they used to hate him. But it just seemed it's just a studio show, and yet it brought out a lot of hot takes. And I guess good for all those people still keeping the business flowing.
I like the fact that you were troubled by Reggie Bush losing his Heisman. That is definitely not the worst way an USC Heisman Trophy winner has lost his Heisman, especially at the running back position. So, I mean, of all the things you could do to lose your Heisman, that
yeah, right.
Reggie Bush's parents getting a nice house, not the worst way you could
definitely
do that.
not. So yeah, congratulations to him. That'll do it for football, but we do want to touch a little bit on basketball here. Ohio State and Indiana take part in the 8-9 seed game Thursday at 12:30 on the Big Ten Network in a Big Ten tournament game in the Big Ten tournament. It sounds like this is a play-in game, possibly for the play-in, one of the play-in spots. I think Joe Lunardi said that if Ohio State wants to be safe, they need to win this game and then also beat Michigan State. Getting Kaleb Wesson back, I think that's a possibility, and Nick Ward not being entirely 100%, but he'll play on Friday. So Michigan State will not be at 100%, obviously, but getting Kaleb Wesson back, Chris Holtman had some interesting comments about it on Tuesday, because he had mentioned Monday on the teleconference just how, just because you get him back doesn't mean everything goes back to like it was against Iowa. He's been out 2 weeks now, and Holtman said anytime Kaleb Wesson is out for a couple of days, you worry about him staying in shape and keeping his wind. So that's going to be a concern. That's going to be something they watch, but also just getting reintegrated into the offense. And, they were really clicking against Iowa. That's when Justin Arns was going off and defense would suck in on Kaleb Wesson and then he'd dish it out and find somebody. And a lot of times that was Arns. And so there's going to be, in the games before that, Wesson was having trouble dealing with double teams, and he was just getting into the groove of getting the ball where it needs to be. And now he's gone for 3 games for 2 weeks, and we'll see how he meshes back in. And can they beat Indiana? Of course, they've already done it. Holtman said that he's not telling them what, like the grand scope of this game, and it's for their tournament lives, basically. They're focused on Indiana, but Tom, at the same time, he's also like, we're not, they're not locked in a booth. They all have phones. They all talk to people. They all hear questions. They know, like, this game means a lot more than it's just Indiana in the Big Ten tournament. They know if they lose it, they're probably, done in terms of the NCAA tournament. So 12:30, Tom, where are you going to be on Thursday? You going to be watching the game?
I guess I'm going to have to be in front of a TV. You talked about the players knowing what's going on. I mean, a lot of times the idea of, the bubble, or, are you in, are you out, and do you need to win one game, or can you afford to lose one game? This is about as clear cut as it seems like it ever gets, because there was, I don't remember if it was Joe Lunardi, one of the bracket projections during one of the games, one of those mid-major conference tournaments this week, had Ohio State as the last team in and Indiana as the first team out. It's like, I wonder what's on the line on Thursday in Chicago. I did like your tweet about this game having national championship implications, which is technically true.
That's all I'm saying.
Technically,
it does.
Loosely true. I mean, I think it's fascinating. What Kaleb Wesson are they going to get on Thursday? Because he could come back, if he comes back hyper focused and locked in, and the 2 weeks off and having to watch them just get their faces kicked in a few times. Did that motivate him, or is he going to come out like way too hyper and pick up 3 quick fouls, or is he just going to be out of shape? Like it is going to be absolutely fascinating to see which Kaleb Wesson they get on Thursday, because that could determine whether they have a chance or not. Because Indiana, I mean, you mentioned them beating Indiana, 6 weeks ago? Since that game, Indiana, I mean, while Ohio State has been looking terrible without Kaleb Wesson, Indiana has really gotten their act together. They lost to Purdue by 2. They lost at Iowa in overtime. They beat Wisconsin at home in double overtime. They beat Michigan State at home. They beat Illinois on the road, and they beat Rutgers at home. I mean, that's
pretty good.
That is not. I mean, the Michigan State's obviously a very good team. Wisconsin's a pretty good team. Purdue is a very good team. I mean, that is a pretty good stretch of basketball. They certainly seem like they're playing their best basketball right now. So you're not catching Indiana at a time you would want to catch Indiana. They caught Indiana at the time they wanted to catch them the last time they played, and since then Indiana has kind of started to pull it together, and Ohio State has kind of gone in the other direction a little bit. And you can chalk a lot of that up to Wesson, but this is not a game that it feels like Ohio State should be real confident about. They certainly have a chance. If Wesson plays well, they have a pretty decent chance, but this is not a game that I think you can go in and say, well, they won in Bloomington, so on a neutral court they should be 3 points better and they should win, so it should be fine. So this is going to be a real dogfight, and if they somehow get to the tournament this year, this is another incredible coaching job by Chris Holtmann. This is because the pieces are just not there right now, and every once in a while you'll see someone complaining about how this is Holtmann's fault that this team looks like this, and it's like there's an Ohio State basketball coach who you can blame for the caliber of the team this year. It is not Chris Holtmann. This is what it looks like when a whole recruiting class goes up in smoke, and none of those players stick around for 5 years, and you have to kind of piece it together with transfers and walk-ons and everything else. So this is just a take this season for what it is, and recognize that things are going to get appreciably better next year for Ohio State.
Yeah, and I think even at the beginning of the year, we said, like, the goal should be the tournament, and if you make it, wow, that's job well done considering the roster. And I asked Holtmann about the whole reintegrating Kaleb Wesson, and how do you, like, micromanage it, or do you let him get his footing? And I'm thinking, you mentioned foul trouble. I'm thinking he's going to go in with all of these plans, and there's going to be 2 quick fouls in the first 45 seconds. And then, we'll see him at the 4-minute mark of the first half, because Holtmann's not one of those guys who's just going to sit somebody with 2 fouls in the first half, but you're still going to have to sit somebody for a while. And it wouldn't be out of character for Kaleb Wesson to get whistled. And it also wouldn't be out of character for a guy who's been off 2 weeks to get whistled for a couple of reach calls, or a push or anything like that. So yeah, that's that's going to be kind of the downer, where everybody's so excited to have him back, and then boom, 2 whistles later, and you got the 1917 mark of the first half, and now you've got to throw Kyle Young back in there for another 30-minute game. But it'll be fun to watch these. They match up well. They have, at least this season, and like Holtmann said, the last couple of games have been toss-ups. So we'll see how this goes. The winner then plays Michigan State 24 hours later. Tom, you got anything else? I think we can wrap up now.
I think we can wrap up now.
All right, let's wrap up. Everybody, thank you for listening. As always, please continue to rate and review the show on iTunes or whatever platform you use. We do appreciate that. If you want to go ahead and screenshot your rating and send it to us, via Twitter, via email, we will put you in the running for fantastic gifts, or maybe just programs or stuff like that.
I have copies of the Thrilogy that we can send out, the book that you and John Perennis wrote about the 2014 National Championship game, and the Big Ten Championship game, and the Sugar Bowl against Alabama. That was a fantastic read. If you have not read that, send DM that, and we can send that. Or I can get you, with a good 5-star review and a nice write-up, I can get you on the USC water polo team. I'm just saying, think about it. Wow. All
dear feds, I am not doing that.
That's a $500,000 value, which is pretty good for 5 minutes of your time.
Wow. Okay. Well, this is our last show. Tom will be. No, yeah, that's a great opportunity for anybody out there with kids who is listening to the show. I could get you into maybe USC LA. I know it's not USC, but it's pretty close. It's a couple miles away. It's like a $16 Uber trip. So think about that. We appreciate the ratings, the reviews. We always appreciate you listening, and any type of feedback we thank you for that. So until next time, we'll talk to you later. Have a good night. Have a good day.
Well, she threw away the motel key. I wish it never meant nothing to me. Say you will, now say you will. Oh yeah. Say you will, now say you will. If you tell me that tomorrow's alright, we could steal a car and leave tonight.